Welcome back. I hope you had a great week and some relaxation for spring break. And we're just going to move on along in the book. So we're on chapter 7 right now. So in this section, we're actually going to start looking at income support policies. And before you went on break, hopefully you posted to your 6.2 discussion where you discussed social movements. So I want you to start having a conversation. So you should find some posts that you find interesting, and I want you to go ahead and start a discussion on there. Just remember again to log on at least 3 different days and answer the posts. I know I'm a little redundant and mentioning this every time, but like I said, it's important for you guys to have some kind of dialogue. We're an online class, but I still want you to establish some sense of community. So this week we're going to read chapter 7, and there's some very interesting history here, so I'm sure you'll find something that jumps out at you. And I found I found a podcast earlier this year, and there's about 10 minutes of the podcast I want you to listen to. So it's from here and now. So when you have 10 minutes, I want you to listen to it. Take some notes. And there's a related article from the Smithsonian that I also have. So I want you to read the article as well. Normally in this class, I discuss a photographer named Jacob Riis, who was he was in New York in the late 1800s. And what Riis did was he photographed a lot of New York City's poor, and he started photographing the slums and the tenements, and he shed interesting light on the city. So he wrote a book called How the Other Half Lives. And in this book, he took very in-your-face pictures. Some things he did that were very interesting was Jacob Riis would go and enter a slum at night and set up a camera and do early flash photography and take pictures of people who probably never saw a camera before and definitely didn't know what a flash was. And he got some really interesting realistic pictures, and he published these to give the rest of the city a sense of what people in poverty live like. There was a real interesting situation in the late 1800s where the poor, they had horrible standards. So what I'll do actually is I'll probably throw an article on here for extra reading. You don't have to write anything about it, but that way you can see some of his photography. But like I said, it gives you an interesting place to look at because Jacob Riis shows you how things look when there's very little policy. So it kind of shows our natural state, and it's not very pretty. So after you look at these podcasts, these are a little more contemporary pictures, but I think they're interesting to relate to this class. And so when I heard the podcast, I really wanted to throw this in as a new section here. But I want you to do a Dropbox where you're just going to answer a couple questions. I want you to try to relate this podcast and the article to social policy. It should be very easy for you to do this by now. And one thing that happens at the beginning of this class is a lot of students come in not knowing what social policy is. So I think now you should be at the point where you can relate what you hear to policy. Once you do the Dropbox, I want you to take the Chapter 7 quiz. And then we're just going to post, again, an initial discussion to Discussion 7 by Sunday at midnight. So, as you work through the week, again, it'll be straightforward. You have a PowerPoint. Here's the Smithsonian article. The podcast, it might be, sometimes these block. If it blocks, okay. If it blocks, what you can do is you, let me see, you click on it. And there, and then so it should play right for you. I had to remember how to do this again. But if there's a problem, send me an email. Sometimes you have different things of different browsers of what you have to do to get into blocked content. D2L blocks some things normally. So once you listen to the podcast and read the article, there's two questions I want you to answer. So the first is to write 2 or 3 paragraphs summarizing the Here and Now podcast and the photographic chronicle of America's working poor. And then I want you to write 1 or 2 paragraphs discussing how they relate to the study of social policy. So again, this should be fairly easy for you. And then, as usual, I want you to post an initial discussion to discussion 7.1, and you're going to discuss some of the advantages or disadvantages of TANF and how it is now constructed. We're going to, as you can see, we're blazing through the book pretty quick. So we're going to have 2 more chapters. Actually, we're going to go through chapter 10 in the book. We're going to hold off on chapter 11 until later. And I'm going to have you listen to some scholars and do discussions later on in the semester that we're not really using the book for. So there's some different scholars that I found that are fairly interesting, and I think you'll have a good time listening to them. And you're also going to start reading each other's papers that you put together. So if you have any questions on the paper, please feel free to send me an email. If you have it done early, you can go ahead and put it in the Dropbox. If there's something wrong with it, I'll send you a grade, and that'll be feedback, and you can go ahead and fix it. So, like I said, there's no reason why you shouldn't get an A on this paper. Just go ahead and submit it. Once you're finished, and like I said, if there's any problems, I'll get it back to you. You have up until about a week before the due date to do that. Once we get to the due date, I expect the paper to be done. So if you have any questions, go ahead and reach out to me. Again, on D2L, so go to the class list and send me an email. Otherwise, thank you and have a good week.